There's a new governor at the RBI. The Indian rupee's been depreciating. The last governor's thinking seems to have been to hold off on the depreciation. The new governor seems to have a slightly different thinking. What do you see as being the medium-term outlook for the rupee? To what extent should the rupee be allowed to depreciate, especially given the potential for a political backlash against the central government?
So, I think we have to be a lot more mature about the rupee-dollar exchange rate than the public dialogue sometimes seems to be. First, if the dollar is appreciating vis-a-vis the euro, to hold it from appreciating vis-a-vis the rupee means that then we become uncompetitive in our exports to the euro or to anywhere else which is depreciating. So what you need to look at is across the basket of currencies how we're doing. And my sense is pretty much every country has depreciated against the dollar. We haven't appreciated or depreciated against other currencies, but we have against the dollar. Now, since everybody's looking at the dollar, we look like we're doing badly, but if you look at the euro, it's closing on parity with respect to the dollar, which means quite a bit of decline over the last year. I won't worry too much. The exchange rate is a means for the economy to adjust to things like tariffs, things like the fact that capital is flowing into the US. So don't overreact to the rupee dollar.
So what would be a natural exchange rate for the Indian rupee versus the dollar at this moment from your
I don't want to put a number out there and say, no, I don't want to put a number and say, if we're not there. I think the RBI does these calculations, but others can also do it. What is the real effective exchange rate that we feel comfortable with? Which means taking into account in both the depreciation but also the inflation rate in the in India versus the rest of the world. I don't think we should hold the rupee at a level which is unsustainable. That just means wasting our foreign exchange reserves, and we will need it at some point if things become more difficult in the global economy. So I would say, do what the RBI has always been doing, which is focus on reducing volatility, but don't try and determine what the level is. Let it move towards whatever level it has to move to keep the economy in balance.
But I must press you because you're dodging my question.
I am, because I don't know the answer to that.
No, but if you don't know the answer, who knows the answer? If it is to be meaningful, there's been some commentary about letting the rupee slide to 100 rupees to a dollar, that being a more natural exchange rate at this moment, given what's happening globally.
I would not think that, from what I know, I don't think 100 is the right place. I don't know exactly what is. What I would look at is, which I haven't done, look at the weighted exchange rate against other currencies as well as our inflation, and make sure the real effective exchange rate hasn't crept up. That would make us uncompetitive. It coming down too much would make it more competitive, but would create the potential for some kind of volatility down the line. So I would say reasonable balance is to keep it fairly reasonable until tariffs hit. When tariffs start being imposed, if they're imposed against India, one of the answers is to let the rupee depreciate some.
The other question is about interest rates and the RBI's position on whether there should be a reduction or should it be held off. How would you view this question?
So I have never commented on RBI's monetary policy. I just commented, peripherally on exchange rates. Look, I think the RBI has a inflation targeting regime. It has to feel comfortable that inflation is coming down, and then it can cut rates. I think the economy, right, the problem to some extent is not supply. We seem to have reasonable supply. You can see that in the core inflation numbers. They have been, going at very moderate rates. The issue seems to be more demand. Now, of course, inflation has been high because of food, especially vegetables. I understand that's coming down. That may give the RBI more room, but clearly what it has to do is, keeping in mind the state of the economy, adjust monetary policy rates accordingly.
And what can be done to spur demand? There's a big budget, there's a monetary policy review as well. How should policymakers be spurring demand?
So again, this goes back to, is it something short term or is it something longer term? I think it's this confidence, not just in the industrialists which we talked about earlier, it's also in people, in their futures. And yeah, politicians can make you feel, things are great. But if their daily lives aren't matching that, then they're going to cut back. I think you need to give them a greater sense that they will have better jobs, they will have better incomes. Then you will see the consumption pick up. So that's why I'm saying this is not a temporary thing. I think we've seen it exposed because of the fact that infrastructure came down this time, and we focused on the growth numbers. But consumption has been more tepid in relative to the past in the recent, I would say even post-pandemic, and that would suggest something has broken, and that, to my sense, is household confidence. Which the way to repair it is to do much more on the job front, which is why I think the skilling, the apprenticeship, the trying to get incentives for job creation, all those are good.
Thomas Piketty has spoken about the need for a wealth tax of 2% on the ultra-rich in India. Do you think at this stage in India's economic journey that's a good idea? Because a lot of people are pushing back, saying these wealth tax haven't worked elsewhere and that Piketty is completely wrong.
Well, I think Piketty has been right about growing inequality across the world. Whether that's fixed through a huge, or even a wealth tax, part of the problem is the very rich also know how to get around taxes. So, I mean, it's very hard to see any place where wealth taxes get you much. There's a wealth tax in the US, 45% of your wealth, once it's beyond 20 million. Why aren't these billionaires unhappy? Why aren't they trying to change it? Because nobody is really going to be hit by it. They've put it into various trusts, this, that. There's a whole lot of lawyering that goes on, which ensures that the ultimate wealth tax that will be collected will be tiny. So, I think it may be a reasonable idea to collect more in taxes from wealthier people to try and generate more growth by the various spending that has to take place. But I'm not sure that wealth taxes will do it for you. And as far as other income taxes are, we're pretty high already.
There's been a trend of high net worth individuals leaving India to go to Dubai, the United Kingdom and elsewhere. What would you recommend be done to try and change that? Why do you think that's happening, and can the government do something to try and change that?
Well, I haven't. That's another issue that I should study more. What you hear is, people are trying to establish multiple areas of residence and wealth so that they're more diversified against policy change wherever it happens. I don't know how big this is as a factor driving them, but I would try and create more incentives to bring money into India. So one of the big issues, I mean, I hear from business people, is the ease of doing business, right? We've talked a lot about it in India, but again and again you hear horror stories of, okay, a tiny business easy to open. Once it's a big business, then I attract all the Inspector Raj, the tax authorities. Everybody's intent on making my life miserable. It's hard running a business in India even today, despite the government's sort of focus on ease of doing business. Can we make it easier so that you say, oh, look, there's all that demand that needs to be satisfied. Let me invest and let me create more job opportunities for people. So I do think we need to create an environment which attracts investment, whether it be domestic or foreign. Domestic, as you just said, could go out of the country if we're not careful.